former President George H.W. Bush has died. He was born June 12, 1924, in Milton, Massachusetts. He graduated from Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts on his 18th birthday in 1942 and immediately joined the Navy. Bush earned his wings in June 1943 with World War II raging. He was the youngest pilot in the Navy at the time. The future president flew torpedo bombers off the USS San Jacinto in the Pacific. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for a mission over Chichijima in 1944. Even though his plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire, he completed his bombing run before turning to the sea. Bush managed to bail out of the burning aircraft, but both his crewmen died. The submarine USS Finback rescued him. On January 6, 1945, Bush married Barbara Pierce of Rye, New York. They had 6 children: George, Robin, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. After the war, Bush attended Yale and graduated Phi Beta Kappa in 1948. He and his wife moved to Texas, where he entered the oil business. Bush served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1966 to 1970. In 1971, then-President Richard Nixon named Bush as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, where he served until becoming chairman of the Republican National Committee in 1973. In October 1974, President Gerald R. Ford named Bush chief of the U.S. Liaison Office in Beijing, and in 1976, Ford appointed him to be the director of Central Intelligence. In 1980, Bush ran for the Republican presidential nomination. Ronald Reagan won the primaries and secured the nomination, and he selected Bush as his running mate. On January 20, 1981, Bush was sworn in for the first of 2 terms as vice president. The Republicans selected Bush as presidential nominee in 1988. Bush became the 41st President of the United States and presided over the victory of the West. During his tenure, the Berlin Wall, a symbol of communist oppression since 1961, fell before the appeal of freedom. The nations of Eastern Europe withdrew from the Warsaw Pact, and freely elected democracies began taking hold. In 1989, Bush ordered the U.S. military into Panama to overthrow the government of General Manuel Noriega. Noriega had allowed Panama to become a haven for narco-terrorists, and he subsequently was convicted of drug offenses. But Bush is best remembered for his swift and decisive efforts following Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990. Bush drew a line in the sand and promised to protect Saudi Arabia and liberate Kuwait. He put together a 30-nation coalition that liberated Kuwait in February 1991. Operation Desert Storm showed Americans and the world the devastating power of the U.S. military. Bush lived to see his son, George W. Bush, elected president, and he worked with the man who defeated him in 1992 to raise money for millions of people affected by an Indian Ocean tsunami. In his inaugural address, the elder Bush spoke about America having a meaning, quote, beyond what we see. He also said that the idea of America and what it stands for is important in the world. Former President George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States, is dead.